Consciousness Hacking, an article written by Jetty Reach, a PSI core group member. The consciousness in allegory can be compared to a energetic wave program fulfilling modus operandi. In simple terms, what one thinks is what one inevitably gets, for better or for worse. And thus, in the very multitude and varied forms of thinking, the causes realize themselves in reality through the power, quote-unquote, might behind the thoughts. Therefore, a wrongly thinking consciousness can mightily develop a horrible mode of living through the mighty wrong thinking, while on the flip side, right thinking consciousness can develop a mighty healthy consciousness which is pristine, assured, forward-moving, and certain. The extent of the consciousness power is simply unmeasurable, and truly this undisputable fact makes itself known to the human once he/she becomes aware of its processes and operations. Indeed, the consciousness can achieve that which is deemed magical, miraculous, impossible, lofty, high, far and out, and so forth, and on the flip side, generate the most terrible of things. It is completely dependent on the individual human's evolution of spirit and perceptibility to gauge the truth and reality at large, usurped knowledge of its machinations, and put it to use this knowledge. Through the persistent toil of utilization of the knowledge of consciousness and its modus operandi, one develops security, and through security, the nature of programming the consciousness and the necessary certainty comes naturally. With certainty comes might, and with might, the human gains the necessary power, quote-unquote, fuel, to fill up the tank and drive the car to the destination in allegory. Knowledge is indeed the light against darkness, but this is not to say book knowledge as it is erroneously taught by misled academia who have lost their connection to reality and the nature of reality, including but not limited to the consciousness. The fact is that the human was designed to be a willful, conscious, sentient being, part of nature to guide, protect, and sustain nature, which includes themselves. Naturally, just as mankind has manipulated fire to put it into good use, along with many of the other elements and natural occurring processes, same also applies to the consciousness and its usage. Knowledge, therefore, applies to true knowledge, which are facts of reality and the processes of reality, freed from the shackles of deluded, misguided, false, box, limited, only seeing from within the wheel thinking, the latter of which many earth human beings foolishly assume to be the totality of reality. This effect is greatly multiplied when the systematic wheels of consciousness bondage is preached and drummed into the earthlings in almost every quadrant of their society, from their accusations to the overall matrix life that has been forced upon the earthlings through their over-positive addictions to the phones, games, media, sports, politics, religions, etc., etc. The fact is that true knowledge of reality, and the truth at large, and by extension, utilization of this knowledge, can only come once the human being has truly freed themselves or emptied their cup from the rubbish that they've been fed their whole lives through politics, religions, advertising, medias, games, anarchist movements, hatred, vileness, negativism, pessimism, horrible upbringings in education, and etc. The human then comes to realize reality as it is, unburdened and freed, natural and naked, without any false pretenses, sugarcoating, and blemishes. One sees reality precisely as it is and learns their place in it as a part-piece wielder of the universal consciousness that is everywhere at all times, places, and spaces. Through such knowledge, which is of course knowledge of truth and can therefore be said to be the truth itself, can be harnessed just as it was with cavemen discovering fire and learning how to use it beneficially. The fact is that the consciousness in allegory is the supercomputing intergenetic tool of the spirit, and thus can be made into an almighty wonder of the world whose reach is only as limited as what one makes of it. A properly functioning consciousness who consciously directed can achieve anything that is certain about it. Therefore, the consciousness that is certain in itself, that naturally develops might, and this might is developed, then this power source, which can be considered like fuel, can be used to empower and propel the thoughts toward specific directions and attain those specific outcomes. If enough fuel is added to the tank, which is another way of saying enough might, quote unquote, power, is pushed in a certain direction, then the might is so powerful that the consciousness and the subconsciousness, by extension, is overridden, similarly to hacking a program. Once one comes to the fundamental, unshakable realization of the effective truth, that is, the truth that they are truly the Lord and masters of their life, then this truth shakes the human down to the very core of their being, and on unmatched certainty ripples forth into the human being, pushing the human to realize that this power is completely their own, and it is entirely up to them how they wish to gather the power and direct it. Through this state, true mightness, the consciousness, even in the most depressive and dark of times, or even dealing with the worst of burdens, stupid thinking, insecurity, doubts, pessimism, and so forth, can, through the sheer power and force of the true mightness, overridden rubbish and illogical thinking. The consciousness at this state arrives at such a powerful level that the human truly becomes completely in control and can steer their destiny precisely how they choose to be. Such a human can say that they shall be there and they shall be, or this shall come and that it will. Truly, the human who learns the processes of the consciousness, particularly the fact that the consciousness is his or her own tool to go about and experience the life and existence, his or her ship, effectively, then he or she understands, even in the tiniest of micro scales, that they can completely change the outcomes to any situation, no matter how great or terrible it is. The human being effectively becomes the greatest self-leader, and he or she becomes immune from negating negative outcomes. He or she makes their entire life, essentially everything that they are learning, doing, and experiencing, to fall in their favor, the way that they want to, in order to go about fulfilling their might of thought. Truly, such consciousness hacking can only be done by human beings who have significantly arrived at a level of understanding consciousness in wisdom, not in mere learning. Of course, the learning evolution always continues, but practice makes perfect. And the entire lifetime itself was designed to be like a tale of a relative perfection. Mastery can only be attained the more one shows up and practices. The half-baked, lazy, submissive, weak, fragile thinking that mastery is beyond me, or humans were always made to live and glorify life of mediocrity, praising their mistakes, overrising above, persisting and inevitably perfecting, is precisely what keeps the earth, mankind, down from achieving wonders and lasting successes. Now, he or she might attain a mere success that lasts for only a short space of time, only to go on to other shorter successes, if they even happen at all, over living a life that is conditioned and programmed in consistent, constant, forward-moving success, which rises to higher and higher spheres inevitably. Always practicing to protect, collect, absorb, and transform, then continuing the process again and again. Repetition. The fact is that the consciousness is completely neutral, a neutral tool which can be as amazing, as terrible, as Medicare, as the human in charge of said consciousness makes it to be. Therefore, if one chooses to be mediocre, then so he or she shall be. If one chooses to be terrible, then so he/she shall be. And if one chooses to be mighty and great, then so she/he shall be. This unstoppable wisdom morality is the truth of reality, the causality that is reality in all spaces and all times. Therefore, to the one who chooses their path and consistently keeps feeding that path, then the inevitability of their might becomes a process which is aligned with nature's law of causality itself. And to the human being who goes the path of taking the life by the horns, guiding it, nurturing it, protecting it, utilizing it, then he/she fulfills the very purpose of life itself, which is consciousness evolution.